Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today, the shootout that had to happen. The Patek Philippe Nautilus 5711 versus the Piaget Polo S Automatic. We've been begging for this since 2016, and I have finally cornered the two of them at the same time under the same lens. These are watches, well, I think the look says it all. The guy on the left appears to have robbed the guy on the right. The question is, can he pull off the heist convincingly? Let's start with the veteran in the space. The Patek Philippe Nautilus, launched in 1976. The model you see here was actually a 2012 debut with silver white dial. This is effectively the closest to the original G0A41003, as Patek doesn't really have something like the Audemars Piguet 15202 Jumbo. So this is as close as it comes to the original DNA of the Genta design, and it pulls off an awfully persuasive 1976 aesthetic, albeit with modern fit-finish materials and that striking silver dial. It's a thin watch, 8.6 millimeters thick, and it's a compact 40 millimeters, unless you count the wings, in which case it's actually a 42.7, and that's important because Piaget bills its watch as a 42, and depending on how you measure it, the Nautilus could be that. Across the wrist, it's a surprisingly broad watch, only 44.5 millimeters lug to lug. You can see on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I'm going to move out a little bit. That's not exactly how the watch is measured, because there is some swell and flare and fight to the bracelet, such that you can't simply pull it straight down around your wrist. So the watch is 44.5 lug to lug, but it doesn't wear that way. It's actually a 48.6 if you measure the outer extremity of each link from side to side. That's the distance across the wrist. The bracelet is similar to the one on the Piaget, and I'm not going to make any bones about this. Piaget clearly recognized its source material and was quite literal in its interpretation. But the thing about the Nautilus is that the tolerances are tighter, the links are smaller, more delicate, more clearly hand-finished on an individual basis, and the whole thing feels just a little bit more regimented, and I have to say that this feels like the A-team right here. I'm going to say quite honestly, Patek Philippe charges 3 times the cost of the Polo S, and I would say that realistically, a big part of that's going to be tied up in the bracelet. It's simply exquisite. Now, where it gets no additional points is in its use of pin sleeves, because you'll note that Piaget is doing the same thing in its bracelet. So on that count, they're actually almost identical, but make no mistake, though they both use pin sleeves and the intermediate links are fairly similar, the H-pattern central or center links are exactly the same. It's only a cosmetic resemblance. These are not the same thing, and I think when they're juxtaposed, you can see that quite clearly. Now, jumping into the clasp design, this is where I actually feel like Piaget pulls ahead a little bit. The Nautilus has a clasp that's thin, comfortable, and gets the job done. It has a clamshell lock system that makes it secure, but I feel like for $30,000, or more precisely $29,800 US, you probably deserve a little bit more. The case is slim and the case is complicated. This is where you really draw distinctions, because the Nautilus features a multi-layered case. There's the case back, the mid case, and then there's the bezel, and it's cinched to the mid case on the sides with a locking system, whereas the Piaget is outwardly similar in its form when you view it from the front, but when you view it from the side, you can see that there's just not as much going on. It does have a bezel, it does have a mid case, it does have a case back, but the construction is not as nuanced, as sophisticated, or as handsomely finished, micro or macro, as the Nautilus. Now let's jump into the dial, because bezel and dial help to define the Nautilus, and the bezel is vertically striated. You can see that the satin finish goes from top to bottom. It runs from 12 to 6. The dial isn't quite the classic blue that we've come to know and love, but is the silver right here, which makes for better daytime legibility and shows better on YouTube. I actually prefer this look. It's a bit more Miami than Philadelphia, but it's also a bit more me than the blue dial. Black indices, they're all white gold, but they're darkened to create this high contrast effect, and you see there's a dimple style seconds track outboard. There's a date with a quick set, and then the case back gives you caliber 324 SC. SC, of course, being center seconds with the calendar, 35 to 45 hour power reserve, free sprung gyro max balance adjusted in 6 positions, silicone hairspring for anti-magnetism, ceramic rotor bearings, unidirectional winding system. It is quite slim and it is beautifully finished. I can't quite show you all of the nuances of this movement, but if I mentioned that a large portion of the price of this watch is tied up in the bracelet and case finish, I would imagine the remainder, or balance, is tied up in the caliber. 120 meters water resistant. There's a lot going on in that case, and it's all packed into a very small space. Now the Polo, it's an impressive watch on its own terms. It's handsome, it's versatile. At under $10,000, the price is right, and pre-owned, it's going to be $7,000 to $7,500. That's against about $46,000 to $48,000 for the Nautilus pre-owned. Now, the watch is a true 42. Across the round of the case, that's the size we're looking at. It's not like it's a winged outcropping. It is actually a 42, and it's uniformly so all the way around. 9.4 millimeters thick. It is a thin watch, except in comparison to the Nautilus. Now, lug to lug, it's fairly similar to the Nautilus, because 47 millimeters lug to lug, it's bigger than the Nautilus's outright case size, but when you include the flare, the Nautilus's bracelet, and the fact that this one pulls straight down, this actually fits a little bit more easily on a very small wrist. The links are bigger, they're bolder, they're also sturdier, they're thicker. So although not nearly as delicate or pleasing from an artisanal standpoint as the Nautilus, I feel like when push comes to shove and something truly horrible happens to your watch on the wrist, this one's not going to give up the ghost. The Nautilus, I can't say. This does not feel fragile. The Nautilus does. The clasp here is not nearly as beautiful as the one on the Nautilus, but it's a hell of a lot more secure, and a trigger system feels like something you deserve to have on a watch that costs 4 figures or more. No clamshell here. Piaget actually didn't cut costs here, going with some sort of a friction fit or a clamshell. It's a trigger system and a twin trigger double deployant at that. Jump into the case. It's simple, but what's there is effective. There's a nice transitional bevel that runs along the flank of the case, between the hood of the case and the hood of the lugs, as well as the satin flank of the case itself. It's polished underneath the mid case to create the impression of a much thinner watch, and it works pretty effectively. About the dial, you can see it has the same horizontal striations, albeit thinner than you find on the Nautilus, with applique indices, and I give points for that, but you'll note that the striation of the bezel itself is from 9 to 3 rather than 12 to 6. The crown is a push down rather than a screw down. Piaget locates its date at 6 o'clock, which I think actually better anchors the dial. Turn it all around. Cartier fans, you'll recognize the twin mainspring barrel MC1904 here doing business as the more finely finished Piaget P1100P. 50-hour power reserve, 28.8 beat rate, 25 joules. It features Edicron, which I actually consider to be an excellent thing, and that bodes well for the precision of the movement as well as its ability to be regulated precisely. Circular Cote de Genève on rotor and the bridges, but all of it machine executed. The screws, however, are true kiln-fired oxidized blue, not dyed. And I will actually show you this cool feature. Look at that, a stopped balance, and it's a chronometer grade balance. But hacking or stop seconds, not only does this watch have the quick set function that the Nautilus has, it also has stop seconds. Take that, Patek Philippe. Finally, 100 meters water resistant. The Nautilus is 120. In the real world, I would give more credence to the Nautilus simply because it has a screw-down crown and I trust in screw-downs. I have no doubt the Piaget is 100 meter. I simply think that the Nautilus is more than its stated 120. Okay, Piaget, advantages. First things first, it's a more visible watch by night. The Loom shot is more spectacular. It's a lot more affordable. $9,900 new and $7,000 to about $7,500 pre-owned. You're talking somewhere between 1/3 and 1/7 the price of the 5711, depending on whether you buy the two watches new or pre-owned. The watch also features a longer power reserve, 50 hours versus 45 at best in the Nautilus, and likely less. The timepiece features a hacking seconds function, advantage Piaget. It also features a clasp of undoubted quality and a bracelet that is far less fragile. They're not as beautiful, but they're definitely tougher, and you can feel that in the hand. The Piaget is definitely the value play. Maybe it's your beater Nautilus or your daily driver. It's a fine timepiece in its own right, but it's always going to be suffering in comparison to a watch that sells new for almost 30 grand US. What the Nautilus has going, especially in the silver white dial, is better daytime legibility. It has a more finely finished case, bezel, bracelet, and even that clasp that I've badmouthed is immaculately finished. As the artist works on the watch, the evidence is laid clear for the owner to see. There's nothing hidden here, not even the movement, which is visible and visibly better in its finish. This is a hand-finished caliber, not a machine-finished caliber. The presence of silicone to resist magnetism, a bigger factor than you think in the home and office, is a major advantage to me. It also has the Patek Philippe seal and a guarantee of no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day, which is something the Piaget cannot match. It is thinner and more elegant on the wrist and a more versatile timepiece stylistically. It could be your dress watch, your sports watch, and if you were to have just one, this would be a stellar-only watch. Both of these watches have their place. The Piaget gives you high style, high durability, and a lower price. The Nautilus gives you everything without compromise at a price to match. See them and make your own decision on the Watchbox. Piaget robs Patek Philippe under the cover of darkness. On the left, Piaget, on the right, Patek.